For argument's sake, let's say that they are in two different universes and analyze the cosmology and power of the verse if we assume that premise. That won't change anything. The most common misconception is that if they're in different universes, that must somehow entail that the Soul King must have created and separated two or more universes. We could argue that the Soul King simply split the original planet into two versions and put the two versions in two different universes that already existed. That doesn't require him to have created any universes, nor does it require him to have separated anything past the original planet.
So the problem with that argument is that he's presupposing that the realms existed beforehand, and outside of the Garganta and the main dimensions and the Dongai, etc., there was just a planet outside of all of reality, and it's just floating in some weird limbo, which then the Soul King just separated the planet and put them in already established dimensions that was separated from life and death, which that wasn't described to be the case. And why would a planet be representations of life and death? Why would planets be considered reality or some shit like that? It makes sense that these spiritual dimensions and physical dimensions is the life and death that the Soul King separated. Well, the noble families used the Soul King's power to separate them, and which makes sense as to why the Soul King being the linchpin for reality, his powers able to sustain the Garganta, the three realms, the Dongai, etc., and which is why when he dies, everything else crumbles, including the Garganta, which there's multiple statements of the Garganta also being destroyed and not just the three realms, and that they created the boundaries between the three realms, which the boundary is the Garganta. So he's just completely wrong.
We know that the Soul King can separate a planet into a physical and spiritual version, and if we accept the notion that they are in different spaces, then we also know by default that he is capable of moving planets to different spaces. And we also know that parallel universes exist in Bleach. This interpretation checks out. And I know that a lot of people will be quick to shout headcanon, but the truth is that this interpretation is just as valid, if not more valid. Because what's a bigger stretch? That the Soul King separated the planet into two different versions and put them in different universes, which by the way we know he did either way, or that the Soul King separated quadrillions upon quintillions of celestial bodies for no apparent reasons, made two different space-time continuums, moved those space-time continuums away from each other, and then put each celestial body into their corresponding space-time continuum. Not only does the second interpretation make far more assumptions and makes bigger leaps of logic, but it would also be arguing for a level of power that's never been demonstrated in the verse, and abilities that we've never seen the Soul King have. Therefore, the second interpretation can be ruled out as a far-fetched hypothesis, and it can be dismissed by Occam's razor, and the first interpretation would be much better.
Gross, he's making a lot of assumptions, right? So, first assumption, he's assuming these realities existed while life and death were already separated besides one planet. He's assuming that there is another Garganta with other dimensions exactly the same as the main one because of possible futures, because of Yuabaha's Almighty, and he thinks that those possible futures is physical realities, so he has to prove that there is another Garganta, so on and so forth. He's also making an argument from ignorance because he's saying that because we haven't seen the Soul King do such things, therefore he can't do them. So you would have to prove that he can't do them and not just say we haven't seen it, so that's why. And him saying that we haven't seen power that can create dimensions, therefore the Soul King can't do it, is also an argument from ignorance. But we have seen characters create dimensions, such as that random boy that created Karakura Town, which seemingly had its own star, and he can create pocket dimensions in that. And we know that full breeders carry a piece of the Soul King. That's how they get their powers. So we know that since that boy can do it, the Soul King and all of his glory can do the same thing. We also know that the Soul King's power transcends everything, exactly the same as how Mugetsu Ichigo's power is stated to transcend everything, but for the cost of everything. For the cost of all of his spiritual energy, or blah blah blah. So Mugetsu, which is why Shikai Ichigo, true Shikai Ichigo, can one-shot a weakened Soul King that still has the power to sustain reality. And we also know that the five great families used the Soul King's power to create the Garganta, which is the boundaries between life and death. Without the Garganta, all of the realms would become one again. So, yes, the power to be able to do these things and have enough power to be able to do these things have been shown in Bleach. Saying that you haven't seen it or hasn't been shown, blah blah, is irrelevant. And also, we know that, well, what you're saying is the biggest stretch checks out because there's actual evidence for it rather than random ass assumptions. So it's your burden to prove that your assumptions is more likely to be the case rather than, oh, I have a few assumptions, Occam's razor, therefore my assumptions are valid. That's just not how it works. We have evidence to support our arguments and claims.
Interpretation would be much better. Remember God Aizen, who was confident that he stands a chance against the Soul King? The same Aizen made a massive deal out of warping space. Apparently he's just an idiot that doesn't know better than the random fans that make up interpretations and say that characters below his level should be universal plus to WoW multiversal, if not higher. Remember Yamamoto hyping up the energy of the sun? Well, apparently he's just an idiot. Yuabach was obviously multiversal plus all along. But what's more interesting to discuss is how would the destruction of the realms and their collision be possible if we accept that they're in different universes, and that's very simple. They're connected through the Dangai and also through the Garganta.
Okay, so him, Aizen, being impressed of like affecting space-time just could be his first time ever affecting space-time with just his power alone, right? So obviously he's impressed. It's the same as how Goku is impressed as, not as, but impressed with Beerus destroying a planet. We're not going to say that Goku, in like just before the just before the Granola arc, is only planetary. That's just ridiculous. We know that Goku is multiversal, bare minimum, in base. And trying to like use these instances as like evidence to like try diminish their AP is just disingenuous. And we've seen like weaker characters warp space, but not space-time, so yeah. And as for the Yamamoto statement thing, Yamamoto wasn't hyping up star level AP retard. He was hyping up the heat of his flames, which the heat of the flames was what was threatening. It being 15 million degrees was the issue. And also, just because your AP is like, let's just say outerversal, that doesn't mean your resistance to fire would be like outerversal just because your durability is that high. Resistances and your durability and endurance are not the same things. They're different stats. So the heat can damage them, but like the AP behind the fire attack may do nothing to him. And also we know that Yamamoto's flames is just his spiritual pressure. It's not even like a fire attribute. It's just because he's so strong, his spiritual pressure takes an appearance of fire. And as for the realms destroying thing, the Dangai is just what connects the two realms so that you can travel between the two dimensions. That doesn't mean that without the Dangai, the realms are just all of a sudden clash into each other. Nah, the Garganta is the reason why those realms can destroy themselves by just clashing into each other if the Garganta were to disappear, which is what you were like kind of saying. So I kind of agree with that part at least. With the Garganta stuff, and again, the Garganta only exists because of the Soul King.
Hence, every single instance of them using the Dangai connects them directly to the physical world and the spiritual world, and nowhere else. We never see them go anywhere else with the Dangai. So we could argue that the collision is made possible through those subspaces, considering the fact that the Garganta even covers the two planets, basically. And since they are directly connected, they are capable of colliding. And here is one final thing to consider. This is going to be purely logistics and sound reasoning. The show makes it very clear that the full source is limited to the two planets, with the extra planet of Hueco for the holes. If it applied on a universal scale, then why do we never see species from other planets go to the Soul Society when they die? After all, the databook verbatim says that all of the spirits that die in the world of the living go to the towns located around the Serite. Why do we never see beings from all across the universe in there? Why is it that Shinigami hyper-focus on Earth and are only seeing keeping an eye on this specific planet? Why is it that we never see them go to any other physical planet to keep the balance there if this was a universe-wide thing? After all, it's verbatim stated that if the balance of the souls is off even by a single soul, the worlds would collide. And surely the infinite universe with infinite possibilities would have a ton of life to keep in balance. Furthermore, there are only a few thousand Soul Reapers, and that debunks the notion that this is a universe-wide thing, because that would be too much for a few thousand Soul Reapers to manage. It makes sense for them to be able to keep up with Earth, because Earth only has 100,000 deaths per day, approximately. That's somewhat manageable, but in the scale of the infinite universe with infinite possibilities, that would be too much for a few thousand Soul Reapers to keep up with. Also know that, as we've mentioned, all the souls that die in the world of the living go to the Soul Society, or rather the cities next to the Serete. So why is it that in an infinite universe with infinite possibilities, we haven't seen any other species and any other beings? Only souls that come directly from Earth. If anything, if this was a universe-wide thing, it would be infinitely unlikely for us to see even a single human, because most of it would be populated by all sorts of other infinite many species. And yet that's not the case. If Kubo was so open about it being a universe-wide phenomenon, as people claim, why did he not show or mention a single soul that came from a different planet other than Earth? Why is it that when Senjumaru shook the two worlds, we see small earthquakes on the surface of the planets, and not stars or universes that are shaken? That would surely represent that this is a universe-wide scale, but he chose to show the planets and their surfaces instead. If Kubo really intended this to be a universe-wide thing, he would have made that clear a long time ago, but instead, what is consistently suggested is that these are three planets and only they're involved in the fall of Konpaku. Oh, don't bring the value of the screams up, those are pocket dimensions that the Soul King didn't design, and they aren't unintended, they are simply the result of the disruption of the fall of Kenpaku, and all of the souls there are made of Earthling souls to begin with, so yeah, it's still linked to Earth, not any other physical planet, so this doesn't debunk anything. Take, for example, counter statement where the world of the living and the Soul Society are synonymous with planets. For example, when they say that Grimjo went to the world of the living. Where was he again? Oh yeah, on Earth. Or when Ukiora went to the world of the living. Where was he? Oh yeah, on Earth. Or when Ichigo and the gang invaded the Soul Society. Where were they? Oh yeah, on Parallel Earth, on the spiritual world. Or when the Queen she invaded the Soul Society and ruined it. And what did that refer to? What did they attack? Oh yeah, we see them attack the spiritual world. So yeah, sure seems to me like those terms are actually in reference to planets. Like they are synonymous with those planets.
Okay, so he said a lot, and essentially, bro doesn't understand what settings mean. Like the concept of world setting just doesn't apply to him. It could just be the case that Kubo or the author made it so that only Earth has souls on it, or it's just hyper focused on Earth and the Soul Society, and there could be other planets in the physical world that are like Earth, but they do not matter to like the story that is happening for Earth. And there could be also other planets that have a version of Soul Society in the Soul Society for their story, etc. And they can do their own thing. The author doesn't have to hold our hand and show us every inch of the world that he has created, the verse that he has created. Or it could be the case that only those two planets that have life in it exist in those dimensions, same as how only our planet that has life on it exists in our observable universe. Thus far, with a universe that is infinitely increasing, we haven't seen a single planet with other life forms on it. So why would we just assume that an infinite universe, there should be like multiple planets with life on it? That's a baseless assumption. So he doesn't really understand of like world building or just the setting the author has made for the verse. And why would they even go to other planets or to other stars or solar systems that don't have any life on it? Why should there be other life forms than what we have shown? Just because, like, what's it gonna do to the story? Nothing. Probably ruin the story, but like it makes no sense. Like there doesn't need to be extra life forms or whatever. And as for like the Senjumaru thing, it stated that the heavens and the earth of the three realms of existence would shake from just the slightest uses of their power. And what do we know? We see the main planets that exist in those realms shake. We don't need to see the entire universe shake. As long as we see just part of it, we know that her statement is true. So you're again just appealing to an argument of ignorance, saying, well, we don't see it, therefore only the planets of the area shook and nothing else. That's an argument from ignorance. We already know that the universes were being shaken because of the statement. I can't remember what else you said, but that's pretty much it.
Firstly, for the power, there is no real proof that the Soul King is planetary to begin with, as the novel states that it was him and the 5 other founders who created the world together, so it's a shared feat. We also don't know how much time it took and the method it was done through, so there is absolutely no reason or basis for him to be planetary. In my previous video, I was simply trying to be more fair, to give them a more leaning towards them interpretation, even though I don't necessarily believe it 100%. What's even worse is that while there are a lot of Bleach calculations that people used to claim that even the lower level characters are country to continental, it's important to remember that all of these calculations are based on speculation, with the sizes typically being inflated or exaggerated through the nitpicking of inconsistent panels. And this is indeed the case with Bleach, considering the fact that we have Tokinada saying that nuclear weapons are terrifying and even resorting to developing a fortress as a way to defend himself from humanity once he invades the world of the living. In fact, he even resorted to developing and using weapons that are said to be equally strong as nuclear bombs. And the strongest nuclear bomb is the Tsar Bomba, which is only 15 megatons of TNT. The same Tokinada isn't fodder, he's actually easily captain level, being able to take on Kyoraku, who is the head captain of the Butei 13, as well as several other vice captains all at once, and he was actually winning for a while. He is even said to be capable of slashing Kyoraku in half if he gets a hit on him. In the same novel, the power to smash a meteor is also looked upon as a God-level feat, which is consistent with the mass of the meteor being too much for the Seireitai to handle in the manga and anime, and even the Stern Readers being worried about the meteor and even saying that they have to protect Yobach. Granted, this was a base Yobach, not an almighty Yobach, but it's still quite the interesting statement there. We'll go further, Kenpachi was quite literally excited to cut the meteor, even noting that he's never cut something like this before, and on top of that, the manga implies that at the time he had the strongest attack potency in the burst, with it directly stating that his blade has no match. This would entail that not even Yobach scales to Zaraki's raw power. Oh, and by the way, any argument that the meteor was sunk by Granny or Reietsu is actually completely irrelevant and pretty much headcanonish, and even the manga verbatim states that the reason that it was so strong and the barriers couldn't handle it is because of its size and mass, not because of it apparently being camped by Reietsu. So yeah, we can conclude that based on the statements, Granny simply spawned the meteor but didn't attempt it afterwards. Even more noteworthy, God Taizen and Dangai Ichigo quite literally viewed cutting a mountain as a God level feat, with Taizen going as far as saying that he didn't expect to become this strong after becoming a God, noting that Ichigo should be afraid of him, that his power now is in a completely different dimension from Ichigo's. Oh, by the way, this completely debunks that Taizen was being literal when he was talking about the dimensional stuff. This was simply a metaphor and an analogy to represent how people cannot perceive something much greater than themselves. It wasn't literally referencing that he was in a higher dimension and that Ichigo is in an even higher dimension. According to the Bleach fanboys, we were supposed to believe that the reason they couldn't sense Aizen was because he literally had higher dimensional power. And yet Kisuke, Ishin and Yorichi were all able to hurt Aizen, and if he was higher dimensional in the literal sense, he would have been more than infinitely stronger than them, yet clearly that's not the case. Furthermore, we were supposed to believe that Dangai Ichigo had literally higher dimensional power from Aizen's, which means that he would have been literally more than infinitely stronger than him, and yet Aizen was able to hurt him, and even after hurting Ichigo, he was like, oh shit, his power must be on a higher dimension than mine. So Bleach fanboys, you really have only two options here. First, to admit that this is metaphorical and not literal, which is the logical conclusion. Or the second option, keep being a rat and trying to argue that Aizen was higher dimensional literally, but if you do that, you'd essentially be arguing that higher dimensions in Bleach are weaker than higher dimensions in the real world, considering the fact that lower dimensional power can apparently hurt higher dimensional power according to your argument. This would, funnily enough, also nerf higher dimensions in Bleach, which would mean that the cosmology would get weaker, considering, again, apparently according to your argument, higher dimensions in Bleach aren't infinitely above lower dimensions, and in real life, higher dimensions are more than infinitely above lower dimensions. So yeah, pick your poison. Most, maybe 5-dimensional power in Bleach is like mountain level, considering the fact that Taizen says that cutting a mountain is higher dimension of power. Damn, this nerfs the cosmology so much. Thank you, Bleach fanboys.
I was flabbergasted when Broski says that like the Soul King's not even planetary. It's like Broski just doesn't know how to read, right? I've already explained my argument as to why the Soul King is far above that, with the whole Garganta stuff, the dimension stuff, how the 5 great families used his power in order to create such things. But yeah, Broski's just being a rat. And then also him trying to say that like Kenpachi being stronger than Yuabaha when we later see a clone of Yuabaha, Roidoid, beating the dog shit out of him. Yamamoto comes, has to save Kenpachi because like he's been fucked up by this clone, a fake that can't even use his full power, well, the full power of Yuabaha, which just debunks the hype text of the cover page saying that like whatever he was showing, right? I'm also doing this off the top of the domer, so I can't really remember everything he says, but like most of what he was just saying is just bringing up some inconsistencies, such as nuclear weapons affecting these are top tier characters. The thing is, well, I don't know the context of these nuclear weapons, if they're like infused with reishi or whatever, but doesn't really matter. I'll just view them as inconsistencies, similar to how in Dragon Ball, Lightspeed being oppressive, you know, Lightspeed Dispo, and then he eventually reached faster than light, and then you have other scans of like Goku being impressed with planet destroying power, him being scared of Broly that does an attack that could have destroyed the planet, and him being scared, blah blah. There's a lot of these inconsistencies within fiction, especially the ones that are like power based. So I don't really view them as like valid when somebody brings them up. Anybody who knows Key, again, tell him to come debate me. I'll be more than willing to address all of his arguments and just dog walk him on stream. Also, him bringing up Aizen's statement is like what, like 2015 type level IQ. We know that Aizen was just impressed of how he believed that he was the one that destroyed the mountain, but he was just impressed of how it was destroyed, not that the mountain was destroyed. Him casually swinging a sword and accidentally existence erasing a mountain is impressive. And trying to say that like, oh yeah, this guy is only mountain level, then you would have to concede that Grimmjow is stronger than Dangai, Ichigo, and Aizen, because pretty much every Espada, if they wanted to, can destroy Las Noches, which is far greater than just a mountain. And we've seen weaker versions of Ichigo performing greater feats, such as destroying the scaffold of the Kyoigyoku, which the Kyoigyoku can destroy the Soul Society and has enough spiritual pressure to overwhelm everything in existence, which I would interpret that as just the planet of the Soul Society, it being able to destroy the planet. Ichigo one-shots the scaffold that can withstand the Soul Gyoku's full power, and then he also blocks the Soul Gyoku without even trying, and is confident enough to go again, like block or defend against its attack after it gets stronger and that. And then you also have like the Aizen statement as well, sort of like planetary Soul Society arc Ichigo, and then you have this like rat trying to say that Soul King's not planetary and that Aizen's like mountain level and that. Also him saying that Aizen wasn't being literal is something that he has to prove is the case. You can't just make a positive claim and then expect people to just believe it. If you guys watch my How Strong Is Mugetsu video, which is like 5 minutes, you'll be able to see why Aizen's statement is more than valid enough. So yeah, and that's pretty much it for this talking point for his argument. I just can't remember everything he says. I did just skim through it because I just couldn't care less about this. I just couldn't care less, honestly.
This brings the topic, are the Soul Society and the world of the living truly in the same universe? And the answer is yes, because they are verbatim said to be within the same universe. In turn, we have to ask ourselves, is it possible that a spiritual planet and a physical planet exist in the same universe? And the answer is very simple, yes, they can coexist. It's literally built in within the war. It's literally built within the war. Not only were life and death originally one before being separated, but it's also stated countless times that if the balance of the worlds is destroyed, they would come back together and become one once again. So it's very clear that the spiritual and the physical can coexist. In fact, we have countless examples of spiritual beings going to the physical world of Earth and interacting with it, and in fact, the gravity and the momentum of Earth are capable of affecting those spiritual beings, because otherwise they will be left behind in space as the Earth is drifting through it. We have several examples of physical characters going to the spiritual realms, and even the whole Kurakara town being teleported to the Soul Society at its outskirts. So yeah, another question people bring up is how come humanity haven't discovered the Soul Society if it's truly in the same universe, and the answer is humanity hasn't discovered all the planets there are. In fact, even in our own solar system we have examples like planet X. We can see it, we can't exactly track it, but we know it's there because we can calculate the gravity. Not to mention that the view is blocked. But even more importantly, the Soul Society is a planet made of Reishi, which means that humans can't exactly see it, and in fact, Soul Society may even be able to explain planet X.
So first off, no, they're not in the same universe. Well, I lied. They are in the same universe, in the sense of they're in the Garganta, which is a universe that contains other universes, simply like a macrocosm like Dragon Ball, having a universe that contains multiple universes, which is why they call it Universe 7. The same case for Bleach, there's multiple universes in a larger universe, which, yeah, technically speaking, he is right that they are in the same universe, but the dimensions that are in the same universe are not in, like, those dimensions are not fused into one, per se. He's trying to, like, make the argument that the planets, right, I'm just going to use the planets for examples instead of the dimensions because things just get a bit confusing, are in the same plane of existence, right? So no, that's where I disagree, because they're confirmed to be separated by the Donagai. They're not in the same space. They're in separate spaces located in the Garganta. And Donnie tried to bring up that in the original universe, life and death were one. Yeah, that's true and all, but that doesn't mean that currently the life and death were one. And then you also showed the scan of Rukia explaining how souls work, and an overflow of souls could tilt the universe to one direction, and then, you know, the two worlds dimensions would clash and become one again, which shows that the dimensions are not in the same universe because they're separated. Because if they were in the same universes, then obviously the balance wouldn't matter, because then life and death will be one. And as for like bringing up souls, that like physical bodies have souls, that doesn't actually help you with anything, since the bodies that contain those souls, when they die, the soul goes to the afterlife. Right, they have the physical bodies, but then once their physical bodies die, they go to the afterlife. That's not life and death being one. That's just the cycle of life and death, not life and death being one. Life and death being one would be the spiritual realm and the physical realm being one. That would be a fusion of life and death, but that's not the case. So, yeah, Broski's just wrong. And that's it for this video. This video is like an hour long. I thought it would be shorter, but pretty much his entire video was wrong, and I'm leaving out some clips that are just irrelevant, such as like the speed stuff, since I'll get into that stuff in my How Strong is Bleach video. And then I'll also get into like the whole verse stuff and why it is canon, and why you can use the information in there, and etc, etc. It'll be a lot better scaling than what I am presenting and what this Donnie has presented. But until then, peace.